Hello and welcome to Motor Trade Talk. I'm Steve Corwood.
And I'm Nick McDonald.
And we've decided to bring the Motor Trade Talk podcast stroke YouTube back to life because it's about time. I think we're getting loads of information out there, aren't we, Nick? And from an independence view is what we want to look at it for. Try and give back to the independent sector. Seem to be seeing a lot of like OEM and manufacturer based stuff, and we just thought maybe we can put something together. There'll be new topics and different discussions that we'll have each week. What do you think, Nick? What's the reasons behind it? Why you think we should be doing what we're doing?
Just like you say, really, me and Steve have both, always been around the independent sector. All the news seems to be focused on franchises, manufacturers, main dealers, and that news is out there and very well analysed and discussed. And yeah, we just want to try and break it down to what it means for independents, try and get some of you guys in on the discussion, and ultimately just try and, make everyone more aware of what's going on and how it might relate to you.
Yeah, and on the same token, if anybody does want to, like Nick say, get involved in the discussion, let us know. And we're going to try and bring some hints and tips and some advice, whether that be around marketing, current state of, people's health and mental health, which is quite a big thing in the industry at the moment, and loads of different pieces along the way. But for this first one, this episode one, if you like, we're going to just bring you some news from the last week or so. It's repetitive stuff that we keep seeing, and we just want to sort of cover some of it to say, what we think it may be for the independent sector. We'd love you guys to get involved and obviously drop your comments as well. And we're going to be covering today, first off, Vanarama. People might think it's not something to do with the independent sector, Nick, but it could be something that we need to be considering moving forward. What do you think?
I think the thing is, with anything that involves Auto Trade, there's always going to be one, big news, and two is going to be relevant news. Most of our independent trade use Auto Trader, or certainly that's where the customers are going to be going. So anything that potentially changes where those eyeballs go when they're on the Auto Trader site is definitely going to be relevant.
Definitely. And then we're gonna skim over. Can't really say we can skim over CAP HPI and valuations that are going on at the minute. It's not something we can skim over. It's something that is going to cause a few people a few problems, I think, moving forward. And then we've got obviously inflation and cost of living, and some changes in the oil crisis, and what's going on in Russia and the Ukraine is having a bit of an impact on that. So we're going to get started, but here's a little intro into Motor Trade Talk, and we hope you enjoy the show. Okay, so we mentioned there at the start of the show, Auto Trader acquiring Vanarama for 200 million. Great deal for Vanarama, especially seeing the loss making that it is doing. But it is a powerhouse, and they've been spending a lot of money, haven't they, Nick, in terms of the brand? And it's a great brand. They've done a great job.
Yeah, done really well. I think Vanarama is a good brand, just as a brand to buy as much as anything else. They'll feel like they've won the Premier League, not the conference or whatever it's called these days that they sponsor. And I think from Auto Trader's side, it's a big scary number, but it's kind of probably they've bought it instead of someone else buying it. Like, who else really is out there at the top of that, leasing game, and especially commercials game? It could be a case of we want it and that no one else can have it.
Yeah, and they've said that they're looking to expand on a leasing platform, which is, part of their platform. And, there was a quote, I think it was on Car Dealer magazine, where they spoke to Catherine Ferrers from Auto Trader, the COO. And she just said the company's acquisition, and this is a quote, the company's acquisition will expand the company's current leasing activity. So, historically, we've probably always seen that, you know, they're just an aggregator. They facilitate the search and for consumers to land, but obviously they're getting involved in wanting to deal direct with consumer, and they've seen that leasing is a growing element. She also said it's about strengthening the existing proposition that we've had for a number of years in a small but growing segment of the new car market. Obviously, there's new car supply issues at the minute, but you know, what do you take from that?
Well, it's my understanding that Vanarama actually have quite a lot of really good fleet contracts still in place for acquisition of vehicles. So while there aren't many available, to get as many as possible is definitely a strategic move on Auto Trader's part. You know, the statement kind of makes sense, but it's not just going to be about, you know, adding to what's a small part of the market. It's definitely not a small part of the market already. And I think it is strategic so that they've got the supply tied up as much as anything else.
I think it's a good time for them to make the move at the minute. And if you think what's happening with new cars, I know we're really looking from an independent market point of view, and a lot of that is around used. There is a lot of independent franchise dealers as well, but you know, we're going to start seeing agency-based models. That's something that's coming. That's not going away. You know, it was talked about. It's happening. Agency-based models. Do you reckon that this could? I mean, I know that Andy Alderson of Vanarama has previously stated that they're well positioned to be able to work with manufacturers within their agency-based model, direct to consumer, and facilitate part of that journey alongside them. Do you reckon this is a good move for Auto Trader to be able to get direct to consumer marketing alongside agency-based models that are coming to the market?
Yeah, it's definitely a distribution based model. I think when you think about agency model, everyone still thinks about maybe turning the franchise dealers into those, you know, like delivery agents or supply agents. That's not going to be the case. It's going to be, you know, it's going to be national where possible. So, you know, that's definitely one side of it. And, you know, when you say it's not, you know, how the new car market affects the used car market, we'll come on to pricing, but you know, it's this lack of new car supply that's affected used car prices in the first place. So anything that Auto Trader changes around how they acquire new cars, and we all know that's how cars are priced these days for resale, is Auto Trader. It's definitely going to affect the used market as well. So it needs to be watched very closely.
Yeah, and on that note, I think as an independent, you know, dealer and everything else, do we have to consider what this play could mean for Auto Trader in the long term from a used car perspective? Do you think that this might be the start of them dipping in the toe in the water towards direct to consumer? Because, you know, they've got to be thinking about something. They've got the best platform out there for research and information gathering. But as the online world has transitioned into, you know, all used car dealers getting better at it and learning more as they go along, putting vehicles in front of the customers and just getting better in general with their marketing efforts. Do you think that in the long term, that, you know, from a used car perspective, this is something that we might have to just be wary of, that, you know, Auto Trader could be the start of them dipping the toe in, or do you just think it's just purely they're just sticking that direction?
I think when something I've always said to car dealers is you don't sell cars, you sell values of money that you're trying to turn into a bigger value of money. It's as simple as that. And again, that'll come on to when we talk about values. Auto Trader are the same. They don't sell used cars or even advertising space for used cars. They just sell clicks, they sell views, they sell whatever the customer wants. And if the customer wants new cars or they want leasing, Auto Trader want them to come there and not somewhere else. So ultimately, they'll be looking at the best thing to present to a customer when they come on that website. They don't want them to go to leasing.com or Lease Loco or even Vanarama. They want them to come to Auto Trader and then stay there whichever way they choose to buy. And, you know, ultimately, you know, maybe it means more people on Auto Trader, which could be a good thing for used car buyers, but it will mean that some of the people on there who were used car buyers may well now be Vanarama buyers.
Yeah, and I think we just need to, you know, be wary of it. I think Auto Trader do a great job. I am a fan of them. I know a lot of people aren't. They do have the pros and cons, should we say? But you know, I think there could be a longer term play in terms of what they might look to do around the used car market, especially with some of the acquisitions they've made in the future, in the past, like AutoConvert, which is a finance platform for everybody that doesn't know that. They're getting a lot of data out there, and they've got a lot of people saying they make these acquisitions, and what's come of them. They're all strategic. They know what they're doing. They're a powerhouse. They haven't got to where they are without, some strategic decisions. And I think they're making the bigger play at the minute. I think they've got to look for 3, 4, 5 years time and where this market's going to be.
Yeah, I think the thing is that they need car dealers still at the moment. The question is, do they need car dealers in 4 or 5 years time if consumer behavior changes to the point where the dealer isn't the focus anymore and online is simply the focus?
Yeah, and I think that's a consideration everyone's got to take. And I think actually we'll bring that up on another show, and just sort of cover some of the things that people can be doing and easy hints and tips maybe. And we'll see if we can get hold of anyone and try and bring them on the show and just sort of give some information back, just to make sure that I think that used car dealers have really got to start strengthening their own brand and their own online identity. I know it's something that a fair few that we work with are really working hard on at the minute, including ourselves. So CAP HPI valuations, they're starting to come down, and I think this is something that we were expecting. I think CAP were expecting it. They weren't expecting it in the back end of March. I think they were definitely expecting it into April, but a 2.1% drop, I think it was last week. Some people saying, "Oh, that's not a lot." It is when you multiply it by a certain amount of cars and what you've got on the forecourt and the prices that people have been paying. And then going into April 1st, some of the price drops that we've seen on some of the tackle is just monumental. What's your take on it? I know you speak to a lot of dealers at the same time.
It's kind of which take. I think there's a few possibilities. I think, you're like you said, we expected the values to come down. I think everyone thought it'd be maybe a year's time. But the question is kind of why. There is the cost of living. There's the energy price rise. There's the fuel price rise. I think there's also an element of new cars starting to be delivered, although there's been a lot of new car supply issues. There was a lot of cars ordered last year that are starting to drop through now. And I think as you see that, there is slightly more wholesale supply into the market.
Do you think that's going to be a knock-on from the consumer behaviour as well? Do you reckon we're starting to see it? I mean, I know there's from a lot of dealers and a lot of the partners that I speak to that we work with, we are getting a bit of a change of mindset around, we've had a fairly decent run, but it depends on their volumes. I'm seeing, if you're carrying lower volumes of stock and lower overhead, it's still okay. People are still having a good enough time. There's some good margins in it as long as you're buying right, and you can do when you're not moving loads of metal in terms of volume. But anyone who's moving 30, 40, 50, 60, 100, 200, 300, 400 cars a month, they're not all having a great time of being able to maximize on it. And I think we're getting an element of dealers starting to feel tired after 2 years of COVID, and then walking into potentially this sort of downward trend that we're seeing and potential consumer behavior. I know we've been getting a lot of people who are wanting to spend a certain amount are actually looking at downsizing or the swapping vehicles in and downgrading. Do you think it's just a case of what's going on out there in the world?
I think whenever there's multiple factors at play, you kind of get a multiplication of whether people can get over one issue or not another. So it can be, all right, we've got gas prices going up, okay, I can get over that. Oh, but fuel prices are going up. Not sure about that. Then there's conflicts in the world. and they can all multiply to the point where people go, do you know what, I'm going to put off that purchase, or even worse, like you say, go, I'm going to go and downsize. And then sometimes when their sales volumes affected, you know, your car dealer wants 15 grand back in the bank, or even 5 grand back in the bank. It's not about that margin that's been made. There's a bill to pay. You know, I best sell that. And if that happens across every single forecourt, or quite a lot, then values have dropped.
Yeah, and I think the thing is fixed overheads don't change. You know, you've got marketing costs and staffing costs. They're not moving anywhere. You know, so even if we're seeing a better profit per unit as such, but the volume's dropping, it begs the question. I know, you know, I've had conversations with a few where they don't need to be carrying the same amount of staff. They're a bit worried about that. Where does it go in the next 2, 3, 4 months? You know, I think there's just something that we have to be wary of. And, you know, some of these price drops, you know, that we've been seeing, you know, we've seen some dealers take up the discussion. I put a poll on the Motor Trade Talk Facebook group, and at the minute, only 5 people have actually responded to it. But, you know, it's 100% of people saying yes, they've seen some big price changes in their stock coming into April, especially April the 1st. And then, you know, there is people who are getting clued up to it, like James Witcher on the poll. He put, you know, lots of people are asleep at the wheel and still paying stupid money out there. And I think he's right. You know, there's dealers that are getting a bit of sleep behind the wheel. It's difficult. We've got to fill the forecourts full of stock. We can't sell empty spaces. But, you know, where does it go? You know, Dave Billsborough from the IMDA, he said, you know, he thinks that it's going to be end of year. We're going to probably see 13 to 18% down on where we were, which, you know, I think that's realistic. What do you think?
Yeah, and that again, that is a big percentage. You know, 18% of a 10 grand motor is what, I don't know, £8,200 or something, instead £8,400 instead of 10 grand. It's a big difference, especially if you've been holding on to that car for a few months. One thing that is interesting around this is We Buy Any Car dropped their prices. It was, you know, everyone was saying, oh, they're not paying as much money for it. And this was a couple of weeks previous, you know, and where did they get their information from?
Well, it's a good sanity check, isn't it? Because they're looking at wholesale at the same time. Wholesale, excuse me. Wholesale, what they're seeing on from their marketplace, which is growing obviously through Cinch. Unofficially. Yeah, and you know, I think what we saw a couple of weeks ago was especially stuff that was 15, 20 grand up to sort of 50 grand's worth of value. They were chopping right down on it. I'm talking like they were coming in cap below, where historically they've been coming in very strong in terms of cap clean. And that sort of set the precedent for us to sort of say, right, okay, you know, I personally sent out an internal distribution to our team saying, you know, this is where we're sat now. We're not that interested in paying anywhere near cap clean for certain items of stock. And like you say, we've got to watch what them guys are doing. You know, we've got to watch what We Buy Any Car are doing. Arnold Clark do. You know, Arnold buys your car. Use some of these platforms just as a little sanity check, whether it's once a week, log in, value a car. I know they won't like us saying that, and if they see it, but that's the truth. You know, give yourself a little sanity check. They're big players. They've got a lot of data. Whether we like them or not, we've got to listen and watch what they do.
Yeah, and ultimately it comes back to stock turn, doesn't it? You know, it's all very well having a big margin in the car, but if you can move those cars on quickly, you've got the cash in the bank and you can buy at whatever the current price is. But, you know, like you said, sitting on a load of stock is just not a healthy position at the moment.
No, it's not. And I think that we've got to look at moving metal, like you say, get the metal gone, keep it shifting, don't blow our brains out, make some profit at the same time, but reinvest that in stock that we don't feel like we're going to get caught out on. The biggest question in my mind is how quick are we going to see the decline towards that 13 to 18%, because I think Dave Billsborough is actually bang on with that. I mean, obviously we're still going to be up on the year before, even if it comes down to as much as 18%. But how quick are we going to see that decline? Will it decline fairly quick, and then will it just steady off into the back end of the year, or do we see that coming steadily? And I think we need to, Car Dealer Magazine are great for giving out information, because they're getting it all day, every day, and listen to what CAP HPI have got to say. I think there's a few changes going on from what I'm getting told internally at CAP HPI, and we'll start to see some adjustments really sort of throughout this month and next. Moving on to inflation and cost of living. This is another big topic, and for the independent sector, again, it's something that we really do need to take note of. Nick, I know you've been sort of looking around this a fair bit and try and get some information off you and what your thoughts are.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's plain for everyone to see that cost of living's going up. It's funny, people throw around the word inflation, and I'm not sure I'm exactly sure what it means. Exactly. It's something you hear in Westminster, and this percentage and that percentage, and we'll use quantitative easing and interest rates, and it's all a load of nonsense a lot of the time, isn't it? But what really matters is what's in your back pocket, and that goes for us guys as well as our staff and our consumers, really. And it, in the face of it, we all know electric and gas bills have gone up, council tax has gone up, costs of things in the supermarket have gone up, or the sizes have gone down, which might not be a bad thing for my waistline, actually. But they do it in sneaky ways, don't they? And ultimately you end up finding that your shopping bill's getting bigger, your gas bill's getting bigger, and your staff are coming along saying, I need a pay rise as well, at the same time as values of vehicles are going down, and we're talking about margins potentially being squeezed again. So it comes at us from all angles.
Yeah, fuel costs going up, unless you're an electric car driver like you are now, Nick. With your Tesla, locking yourself out the office this morning.
I'm not sure my wife's going to let me actually drive it, because she thinks it's just hers, but it's my new toy, really.
Funnily, actually, you should say about some of that, because actually last night I got a piece through that I was looking at as well. I mean, we've got other things that we need to consider in sort of this inflation, cost of living. Road tax has going up again. So vehicle excise duty is going up again, and it's unless you're in an electric car, basically your costs have gone up. So this is something that we've, all these little things, they might not sound like a lot, but we've got to take into consideration some of these bits and pieces when we're not just in terms of what the consumer will be doing within the market, but in the way that we deliver our services to the consumer, the way that we break down our deals when we're presenting them, because they are starting to get conscious about cost of living and how much they're going to be spending each month. So I think from an independence point of view, we've got to really sort of granulate how we perform in front of the customer, and how we deliver the right information to them, so they are making the informed choices, especially around sort of like finance products and their affordability.
Yeah, I don't think most people are daft. The cost of finance, for instance, isn't just that payment. It could be your insurance, your tax, the running costs, the maintenance on the vehicle, the residual value at the end, even if it's not on PCP. There are places you can put more intelligence around that. Now, it can be a bad thing, because ultimately when you present a number that might be double the customer's payment as the total outgoings, it can be quite a scary number. And ultimately that goes back to like kind of Vanarama and Auto Trader as to, the advantage of new lease cars. People are almost willing to pay a bit more on the basis that they know those costs are going to be covered.
Yeah, so I think really what you're saying there is, I mean, from our point of view, as an independent vehicle dealer, as such, we need to get as good as we can at the qualification process with the customers. And, you know, actually what makes it hard out there, I think at the minute, is the amount of information where people are saying, don't tell the car dealer this, don't tell the car dealer, don't give them how much you want to spend a month, and don't give them your expectations. Actually, you know, I think that's old hat, depending on how the car dealer approaches it, because, you know, I think it's a case of, if we know what we're working with, then we can advise correctly. And there might be options for the consumer that they didn't even think about. You know, a different type of car, something that's going to be overall running costs wise a better option for them. And, you know, the other thing that we've really got to consider is the Bank of England base rate has gone up. And we've had notification from several finance lenders, finance companies, with rate increases. So, you know, we've got to make amendments at our end to make sure that our consumers are getting the best deal they can do, without trying to, you know, we've got to negotiate to try and keep our commissions because it's important to us. But on the same token, keeping a good rate to the consumer and making sure we're putting the right options in front of them is paramount.
I think communication is the key. You know, it's kind of, if you're transparent up front, and that is obviously includes your website and your sales staff and other marketing, you know, then customers haven't got to hide information from you. If you're saying to them, look, here is the information on what this car's going to cost you, then they've got no reason to hide it from you. You know, ultimately, how many customers are you going to sell to just by trying to not give them the realities of the situation? Most are going to be switched on enough anyway. And are they going to choose the place that's given them all the information, or the one that's been a bit, you know, low-key shady about it? So let's empower customers and let's give them the reality of the situation, even if that is, look, interest rates have gone up because of this, this, and this. This is what's been set by the finance companies. And, you know, that we're trying to give you the best deal and the reality of the true running costs.
Yeah, proper transparency basically is the way forward. Don't try and hide anything from the consumer is essentially what you're saying, isn't it?
Mm.
So, yeah, I think that sort of wraps us up really for today. Gives us a little overview of some of the most talked about topics. Like we say, there's going to be plenty more from us. It's not just going to be news. There's going to be different bits and pieces. We do want anyone to get involved. Make sure that you go over to the Facebook group if you're not already on there. It's a closed group for automotive professionals. It's Motor Trade Talk. This will be obviously streamed on the likes of Spotify, Anchor, iTunes, some of the other major channels that will go out on. And obviously, if you're watching it, it's on YouTube as well under Motor Trade Talk. We hope this has brought some light on something, some bits, and hopefully covered them parts for you today. If you've got anything that you want us to cover as well, you know, any topics that you think would be beneficial, we're going to try and bring guests on to help as well. Just let us know.
Thanks for listening, guys. And yeah, get involved. Let's talk about what we've been over today. And we're going to make this regular again now.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Have a great
Steve.
day.